Welcome to this episode of Brackish. I'm your host, Katie Tregitten, and today I am talking to Stefanie Cheong, who is a brilliant Glasgow-based artist jeweller, a title that really undersells her work. She is working in deep time with rocks, both found and made, and it's just a really interesting human. A couple of health warnings as we go into this one. Steph does talk about the sudden loss of her brother, so if that's something you're dealing with at the moment or something that feels sensitive, you might want to proceed with caution. I also just want to name that I've got a stinking cold, so if I'm not my normal vibrant self or if my voice sounds a little bit weird, that's why. Other than that, enjoy the episode. Can you start by telling us what you do and how you came to do what you do?
Sure. I'm an artist jeweler, and I guess I'm really interested in the intersection of geology, anthropology, and kind of environmentalism, actually, like the climate crisis and how that can be part of it.
Mm.
But also, I think then that's led on to, I guess, an understanding of materials and how there's lots of potential with materials to storytell. So that's sort of like where I'm at just now. But I also advocate for sustainable making through teaching posts at the different art colleges and also kind of working with arts organisations within Scotland to kind of support other makers and their journeys as well. So yeah, it's exciting. Lots of different things, but all within the sort of craft sector.
A multi-hyphenate career.
Exactly, exactly. You can never, when you're creative, I think you always kind of juggle various different roles to kind of
Yeah,
make,
it's
make
always
it
that.
make it work.
It's always that question when someone says, "What do you do?" and you're like, "Why are you asking? Who are you? I need more information before I know how to answer that question."
Yeah, I'm like I am a jeweler, but there's a lot more to it, I think.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah. I think especially in your work, it's got such depth.
I think I gravitated a lot towards making from quite a young age. I used to just like find scraps, materials from around the house and kind of transforming them was a really sort of interesting way of play for me. And it isn't until I kind of went to university that I discovered that I was dyslexic. So understanding how to play to my strengths at that age is quite nice to reflect on. But finding myself as a jeweler, it kind of came about doing a sort of short apprenticeship where I was working under someone who trained at Hand and Garden just for a short time, for a year. And it was the alchemy of the transformation of metal. So as soon as I worked out that you could melt some sort of tiny scraps and reform it into like a ring, metal's really interesting because it's infinitely recyclable, or you can always change its molecular properties, and I think that's what got me sort of hooked in that sort of direction. And then it wasn't until I was at art school that I kind of reflected on the industry and thought about, I guess, like how I could be more sustainable. So, like learning from the jewelry industry, thinking about the sort of quite corrupt and detrimental environmental processes and mining and looking for gemstones and metal. I wanted to sort of find my own materials, and that's sort of how I came about using found rocks, mainly Scottish just now, but then that's evolved into kind of other areas of research. So.
Yeah, I think there's so many issues in the supply chain with jewelry, aren't there? And a lot of people. I really love the way that you haven't just taken the supply chain as read and then tried to be quote unquote as ethical as possible within that space, but you've actually
Mm.
said, well, if this supply chain is this problematic, then I'm going to create my own supply chain and I'm going to find and make my own rocks, which
Yeah.
brings us beautifully onto the geoanthropology project. So why don't you tell us a little bit more about that project in particular?
Sure. So the geoanthropology project came about. It was actually like during maternity leave, and I was looking at how I could try and bring together my interests in, I guess, sort of geology, but also thinking about how I could make some jewelry pieces that have sort of act as sort of conversational pieces. And so the idea was that I was really interested in sort of charting the way that humans have evolved rock over time. So starting kind of at the very earliest stages, when hunter-gatherers would find bits of flint and use that for sort of tool making and survival, right through to sort of speculating what a future fossil might look like in sort of, yeah, thousands of years. So thinking about, I guess, the idea of the Anthropocene, which is a kind of term coined to explain the sort of epoch or geological time period we're in just now. Um, and also like that idea of the sort of what human impact is creating on our planet. So I wanted a way to sort of investigate those ideas, and sort of, yeah, bringing all together, sort of working with other makers, other scientists, other artists to sort of collaborate on various elements of the research. So at the moment it stands there's like 14 different rocks, and in no way is it comprehensive. There's so many more avenues to explore. But at the moment, I wanted to sort of, yeah, piece together, I guess, ideas of how we as humans have sort of invented and evolved and also exploited like materials, all to do with sort of the geology uh, over time. And so, yeah, as I said, we've got Stone Age flint, we've got pieces of like early clay, sort of thinking about how we kind of just dig for our own mud, and we use that as sort of vessels for eating. And just slowly how over time we then started sort of taking more from the land. And I think there's a stone, it's called spent shale, and it comes from one of the Bings in the Lothians, where in the 1960s, they were excavating a lot of shale at the time and heating it in big clay ovens to take out the shale oil.
Right.
And then they would just like create these big landmines of the shale. And, you know, the piece that I cut is really beautiful, but actually, if you dig in deeper and find out what the story is, it's kind of like it's exploitative, but also if you look at that area now, it's become protected, environmental protected land, because there's a lot of sort of regrowth happening there. And so actually a lot of the stories that I'm trying to tell with the work are, you know, even though they tackle quite sort of heavy ideas, they do have sort of more positive sort of stories at the end.
There's so
Um,
many stories just in that one piece of rock. It's incredible, isn't it?
yeah,
And I love the
yeah.
way this project really operates in deep time. You know, you're using really ancient pieces of rock and looking far into the future about the fossil record we might leave behind. Did you recently find a rock on Skye that was 3 billion years old?
Yes, I did. So
That's
with
insane. Tell us about that.
So yeah, well, with my work, I tend to sort of sometimes research what I'm looking for, like what areas are rich with. So it could be like, for example, in Skye, I was looking for marble because I know that they have marble quarries there. So down by the beach, there's bits of offcuts, or there's just bits washed away that have come away from the land already, and those I can use within my jewelry. But I also discovered this other pinky colored rock with these beautiful sort of sparkly grey veins in it. And I was like, what's that? And obviously, because, you know, I like to sort of do lots of research. I've made friends with some geologists now who I can text pictures saying, what's this piece of rock here? And so it turns out it's this rock called Lewisian gneiss, which is one of the first rocks that were kind of formed on the planet. So I think contemplating the age of it. So when he said it was 3 billion, because everything's maybe like, you know, 100 million years old. And even then it's like sort of incomprehensible in terms of like time. It was 3 billion years old. So I was like, oh, wow. Yeah. So discovering that piece of rock sort of really changed my sort of perspective on things. And so thinking about all the time that's come before and then all the time that comes after, I was really thinking about how that the land, you know, has evolved over time to allow us, or it's sort of fashioned the way we've sort of been able to sort of live and evolve as humans again. So it brings it back to that geoanthropology. So that idea of the way the land's been shaped by geological processes is then giving us sort of healthy, rich soils for growing crops. Those crops then have turned into different materials that can be used within craft processes. And so just how much the land gives us most of the things that we need, or it gives us everything we need actually to sort of live and breathe. And that's, I think, for me, it then concreted how important it is that we need to sort of care for and look after these things that are currently, yeah, being overexploited.
It really makes you realize that human existence is such a tiny blip in the life cycle of the planet,
Yeah.
doesn't it? And I think that can be both awe-inspiring and really humbling. I remember just sitting up on a cliff top in Cornwall where I live, and there were these people having this conversation about how tiny Earth's existence is in the history of the universe, and then how teeny tiny human existences in
Yeah.
the like, and you just think, wow, aren't we lucky that we get to be here for this tiny little moment during which life was
Yeah.
possible on Earth, and then yeah, what a almighty mess we seem to be making of it.
But then
But
it's interesting to go back in time and look at the way the cycles happen with temperature and the way climate changes and drops. But I think it rings home when you're like, oh, actually, we know we have the science that proves that actually we have created this impact
yeah,
but we also have the science that can
yeah,
help that as
yeah,
well. So
yeah.
yeah, although it is overwhelming, it also is like quite exciting, I think, too. So
Yeah,
yeah.
the possibilities and the opportunities are there, aren't they? Particularly in the
Yeah.
very near future for us to sort things out. Um, Tell us about Sitting Pretty, which was another project you worked on.
Yeah, so again, it was another collaboration actually with my friend Andy Campbell of Dress for the Weather. He's an architect company based between Glasgow and France just now, actually. And so we've known each other for years, actually. I used to work in a shop and he'd come in as a sort of student architect. And so we'd always have conversations. So at this point, there was a call out that came live and it was about making a bench. So for him, it was definitely scaling down, but for me, it was scaling right up. So I guess it was just really interesting to see how our practices then would merge.
Mhm.
My interest in geology and rock formations and deep time, and Andy's really interested in materials as well. So we worked together to sort of come up with a concept where we wanted to sort of make a make a bench that would sort of be practical and functional, but also allow the sitter, I guess, to sort of contemplate the ideas of deep time. So the base we so it's basically it was made on the Isle of Bute, so a small Scottish island. So we wanted to think about how we could make use of the rock that was there. So we contacted local quarries, and it turned out they had sort of old reclaimed sandstone from the island that was used to build an old church. That had sort of crumbled over the years. So again, sort of thinking about actually it was used before for another purpose, but actually, and that was like a good 100 or so years before we were making use of it again. But it was like 400 million years old sandstone. So again, this idea of deep time. So we then carved out a top base layer where people would sit, but we kind of put a small layer of it was smile plastics actually. It was post-consumer plastic that they'd collected and they'd formed into these beautiful sort of sheets of almost like terrazzo like plastics with various sort of colors and speckles in it, and that made the top part warmer and then kind of waterproof so you could wipe it if it was raining because it rains a lot on the west coast of Scotland. So yeah, it just made it practical, but then pretty, but then also thinking about how people then would hopefully sit and contemplate that idea of the material use, like why have they used this really old bit of rock and sort of haphazardly shaped it, and then there's this pristine element of the kind of plastic on top. So it was that idea of sort of small gestures towards people sort of considering sort of materials and time and yeah,
That sort of idea of stratas in the Earth's crust that we're
exactly.
laying down over time. I love that. So the sandstone was 400 million years old,
Yeah.
so not quite as old as 3 billion.
No, but it's still old enough,
Still really,
know.
really old. How does it feel when you're working with a stone that's old? That's old. I mean, you're possibly the first human to ever see parts of that stone, right? As you work it. How does that feel?
It feels like a privilege and really special. I mean, it takes a certain skill set to work with stone, I think.
Mm.
It's messy, it's dusty, it's hard, it's
It's really hard.
unforgiving.
I did a Cornish hedging course recently, which involved dressing granite with a lump hammer. And oh my
Well,
God, it's really hard, really hard work.
well, granite's particularly hard. You can be choosy. So sandstone is a bit
A
softer
little bit
on this
softer.
scale. So we deliberately chose something that we know we would be able to tool and work. But yeah, I guess it's just like it's amazing actually that the different types of rock you get as well, and sort of just sort of being able to sort of examine and try and understand and work with the different ones. Each one is so different, even if it's like, there's groups of different sort of rocks and minerals. If you have two bits of quartz from like different places,
Mm,
or granite from different places, there's different hardnesses, there's different mineral makeups. And I
mm.
think that's what's quite exciting, that each rock is never the same, and it all just depends on what was going on in the earth and the heat and the different
Yeah.
minerals at that point.
Yeah, it's that thing you were talking about storytelling, isn't it? These rocks hold so much
Yeah.
history and story and context. Amazing. Now, Steph, I know you've been through a hell of a year. How has your creative practice helped support you through the tough times?
I guess, yeah, I'll just talk briefly. So yeah, I lost my brother at the end of last year, which was very sudden. And so just thinking about the idea of grief and it being sort of part of the human experience. But yeah, I think it's a lot of people have to live with it. But for
Mm,
me, I think my practice has been really, really helpful in terms of sort of like not necessarily working through it, but sitting alongside it.
mm,
Because it's still quite early days, to sort of, yeah, have such a major loss, and trying to make sense of it all. At first I was like, rocks, why do I care about rocks? This thing has just happened to me, and how am I ever going to get back to it? But slowly it was a really useful way of sort of being able to sort of refocus my head,
mm.
and sort of really sort of investigate and be with the things that I enjoyed again. So trying to sort of find joy in the sort of smaller things, um, was a really helpful kind of, not, it's not a tool, but a way of sort of being
Yeah.
after such a major loss. And I think for me as well, like I've built up a really lovely community of sort of other makers, people I work with or collaborate with. Again, people like yourself, other kind of people that inspire me. And I think, actually we did the carbon literacy training actually not
We did.
too long back. Was that in the summertime?
Yeah, I think
Yeah,
so.
just a couple of months ago anyway. And I think that was a really sort of helpful tool to get me back into sort of like caring about the environment again.
Which is, I mean, and so just to give a bit of context to the listeners, I
Yeah.
am a certified carbon literacy project trainer. So you can do 8 hours of training to become carbon literate. And it's a heavy course, right? There's a lot of kind of climate grief in
Yeah.
that course. So we both went into that carefully, didn't we? Kind of aware that you were already
Yeah.
carrying personal grief. But I think it's interesting that that helped because I was concerned that it would make things much
Yeah.
worse.
I think for me, I'm quite an optimistic person. So
Mhm.
I think I was trying to find other things that I could like find that would bring back that optimism.
Yeah.
And I think it was like the timing of it was great, and just trying to sort of like immerse myself in, I mean, I don't know why I wanted to immerse myself in more grief, but it was grief for something else that I could sort of then think about how, or what things that I could do that would help.
Yeah, and it is
And
quite
so
action based, isn't it? It's
yeah,
it's the idea of saying let's be honest about what we're facing, but also find the what I call defiant hope in what we can do about that.
yeah,
And I think sometimes when you're going through something tough, just the positive feels inaccessible. Like you have to kind of meet someone where they are in grief and then climb
mm.
out of it together. So maybe kind of going through that process for the planet was a way of, I don't know, helping with the personal grief.
Yeah, I think it was, again, it was that it gave me a plan of
Yeah.
things that I could tackle, or I could do like some actual sort of tangible things that
Yeah.
I could do that I could control as well, because
Yes.
all the other
Yeah.
stuff felt so out of control. So
Yeah.
it was things that I could just sort of really sort of focus in on, and
Yeah.
make happen in
Yes.
my own capacity. So
Yeah. I
I
think
think,
reclaiming that sense of agency, particularly when you've had an unexpected loss. I remember
yeah.
when my husband and I cared for his mum at the end of her life. And I can remember one article in particular that I was the only person out of the three of us who was working at the time, so I had to work. And I remember one article in particular that I managed to completely lose myself in for a whole day and write, and it was good and submit it, and it just felt such a relief to know that I could do something and it could have the desired outcome. I could turn up, I could be good at something, I could make a difference in a tiny way. And I still remember that one. I'm sure there were other days that, my work didn't offer that much solace. But I think on that day in particular, just the fact I could, as you say, I could turn up, I could do something and I could make a difference, I could control the outcome, I think really helped me. So yeah, that makes sense.
And I think in a way as well, it sort of proved to myself that I was still myself. I think
Mm,
I was really scared that I was sort of losing who I was as a person. So I think
mm,
that was a really sort of, yeah, it was a really good way for me at that point. So yeah, surrounding myself with creative communities and just sort of, yeah, being able to sort of pull from other people's sort of expertise and yeah, I think and then also just making, because, for me, it being in the studio, making is like, again, it's that one thing I know how to do
yeah.
mostly well, but sometimes, well, if you're a jeweler, sometimes it doesn't, you melt it and things can go wrong. But, there's certain parameters within the studio that's really enjoyable and, you can sit and it's sort of, you have
Yeah.
to really focus on things again, like when I'm cutting stones or when I'm soldering or melting metal parts of things that, for me, it's like my brain switches off because it has to do that.
Yeah, and I think there's research not into jeweling, but there's certainly
Yeah.
research into sewing and textiles work that just that kind of repetitive motions that you do with your hands lowers your blood pressure, calms your breathing, kind of puts you into your parasympathetic nervous system state. So I think making has been shown to kind of just bring you back to yourself. So
Mm.
that the research definitely backs up your experience. How about outside of the studio? What are your grounding practices when you're not making, and how do they help?
So, it's funny you say the word grounding because I guess part of my practice is actually like looking for and searching for rocks, so almost like treasure hunting.
Mm,
But often it's done on walks in nature or down at kind of shorelines and coasts. So it's been outdoors, it's been,
mm,
yeah. So it's like sort of my downtime, my calm time. And that all sort of started when I was looking for my own materials back when I was in my final year at uni as well. It was a bit of a hard year. And I think I just gravitated towards like, oh, I can't be in the studio yet. I need to be outdoors. So part of it was like going and finding my own rocks and collecting and coming back. So that sort of has stayed with me.
yeah.
But that idea of, or the word grounding, it's just like a lot of the time with rocks, they have these sort of properties or external properties of like, just keeping you sort of on the ground. And I think with a lot of the rocks that I collect and just spending the time looking at them, it just feels really sort of um just more relaxing and I guess sort of again that kind of mind clearing
Mm.
um
And
really
it's
helps.
again, it's ancient, isn't it? Where I had Helen Bowkett on the podcast recently to talk about Cornish hedging, and she was saying that when we pick blackberries from hedges, we're doing something that our ancestors have done for thousands, if not hundreds of thousands of
Mm.
years. And so there's this kind of unbroken line of humans looking for things in nature. I think it is very grounding to us because it's very ancient. It's foraging essentially, isn't it? Which we've done sort of
Yeah.
since well, gathering since
Yeah, hunting
hunter-gathering
gathering.
times. Yeah, yeah. Tell us a bit about your moon rocks practice because I'm fascinated by this.
Oh yeah, so I started this like yeah, last summer, and I was yeah, thinking about a way how I could sort of take time for myself, but also continue to sort of have a bit of a ritual. Because I think in your practice sometimes you can get bogged down with a lot of the sort of um administrative tasks, or you're just making for clients, or you're making for projects. I wanted to do something where I would just like get excited about new things every month. And so yeah, the moon rocks were a sort of monthly ritual that I sort of decided I would give myself a whole moon cycle to be with. So I would select a rock at the start of like the new moon and work with it right through to sort of full moon time. So thinking about so for example, the Lewisian gneiss was a piece that I used for a moon rock. And so starting to kind of research where it was from, how it formed, what are the different sort of mineral properties of it. And then I would cut it and see how it would cut and if it was sort of, yeah. And then, for me, I'm still doing that, but I'm doing it with sort of geoanthropology rocks right now as part of a sort of like the research of new ones. But yeah, it's just sort of giving the rock time as well. So it's sort of
Mm.
like respecting it and learning from it as well as sort of not doing everything fast paced and it's just for
Mm.
sort of for commercial gain or whatever. So
I
yeah.
love that. And I think, for you, that's rocks, but I feel like I could do that with a poem or a poet and just kind of spend a whole month exploring them, understanding them, taking a poem apart, trying to write it in a similar way. Other makers could do that with whatever their material of choice. It just sounds like just having that moon cycle to be in dialogue with something, I think is a
And
really lovely idea.
for me, it just connected really nicely as well with sort of kind of when you think of tide lines and the waves
Mm,
and sort of, the way how everything sort of, these days everything's like a number on it. And I think it's just nicer to be a bit more sort of, like flowing and natural and
yeah. Yeah, I love that.
not date
Beautiful
specific.
idea.
Yeah.
Yeah, but more tied to the Earth's natural cycles.
Yeah.
Beautiful. So you know that I talk a lot about defiant hope because we've had a lot of conversations. Um,
Many, many, many.
Many, many conversations about defiant hope, and conversations about hope is the strapline of this podcast. But I think, given the conversation we've had, I'd love to talk to you specifically about hope that is forged in the face of grief, in the face of despair. How do you come back to hope? You said you're a naturally optimistic person, but obviously sometimes life can knock that out of us a little bit.
Yeah. And it,
Um,
it changes day to day as well, actually.
mm,
At the moment it is anyway, still changing. And some days I'm much more hopeful than others. But what I think, I think for me it's like connection is really helpful
yeah,
in terms of sort of bringing hope. I feel like sometimes I get bogged down on my own, and actually, if I just open myself up to other people, and I think maybe partly it's because I'm really sort of um, privileged that I have such a good sort of community of family and friends around me to support. But for me, human connection brings hope, even when you do lose something so precious to you, you know, you have to keep going.
mm,
You have to. And so it's knowing the right sort of, people that just sort of understand you and know what intuitively know what you need to
yeah,
support you. Um, so that's, for me in a way it's been quite overwhelming in terms of like how special that is. So it's
yeah.
like leaning into the things that do sort of bring you happiness and joy, but also it just makes it even more joyful in a way. I don't know, grief is it just made me feel a lot more
Yeah, yeah,
about
on the whole
about
spectrum.
everything about
Yeah,
everything. So it's like trying to sort of lean into the happy moments and times. But
yeah. I think it dials up all your emotions, doesn't it? I can remember
yeah,
being in Penzance during, oh God, I've forgotten the name of their big festival. There's a big summer festival in Penzance, and I happened to be there that week, just after I'd lost somebody, and there were children doing a dance outside a dance school, and I was in floods of tears at how beautiful this dance was. And I think, on another day, I probably would have walked past and gone, oh, that's kind of cute. But it does
yeah,
just dial up your emotions, doesn't
yeah,
it?
yeah, it does. I've cried about lots of things like that. Just like, oh,
It's so
but
beautiful.
it is. But I think also in a way trying to hold on to that as well because it
Mm.
is that's those feelings are really special. But yeah, maybe I'll be in a couple of weeks. I'll be different, or I'll have a different answer. But yeah.
Yeah.
So
And I
yeah,
guess it's staying open to all of that in its evolving state, isn't it?
yeah, exactly. But I also, apart from like sort of people and kind of support, I think in terms of hope, there's like for me having such a niche interest. It's so in a funny way, so sort of thinking about like the last few weeks has been really inspiring because I've immersed myself back into sort of the world of design, and I went to the Design for Planet conference and been down to the London Design Festival, and actually sort of looking around to see what other people are researching and evolving new innovative materials. And I discovered, I think it's Tom Dixon Studios been growing rock, obviously my interest. But yes, so he's been growing rock on these metal structures and burying them underground. And they're helping sort of revive coral reefs.
Oh, amazing.
Um, so stories like that, I think, for me bring elements of hope, and especially when they're like so close to what my own interests are.
Yeah.
And I think those things kind of keep me sort of interested and excited about sort of where the future is going to go with the planet. And yeah.
Yeah, I think it's all too easy, isn't it? Particularly as creative folks, we inherently spend a lot of time on our own, and I think it's all too easy to think you're getting connection from social media or online groups or whatever it is, and it just skews negative. I had a silly experience yesterday. I was trying to put petrol in my car, which is something have a weird phobia of. And we've always had really old beaten up cars, and we've got a relatively new car now, and I had opened my petrol cap, and then I thought, oh, I better lock the car because I'm going to go and pay. And then I couldn't shut the petrol cap. And so I had to do that thing I hate doing of being a blonde female and going and asking a man for help. And I was waiting for the judgment and the patronate. And this man was so kind. He was just like, oh, well, of course, you've locked the car. Like, how would you know that
There's a thing.
there's a
Yeah.
thing that pops out and means you can't open or close the pattern? And he was just so kind that I almost cried. But it's that thing that you sort of think that the comments section in the internet would have you believe that people are all mean and
Yeah.
judgmental and patronizing towards women and all of those things. But he was so, I mean, it's just a simple thing, right? He's probably forgotten about it already.
But it was
But
so meaningful to you.
he was
Yeah.
so unexpectedly kind in that moment when I was having a bit of a blonde female moment around cars, which is something I try very hard not to have. So last question, Steph. What are you hopeful for in the future? Both the kind of near human scale future and the deep time planetary future.
Well, kind of flipping it on its head, and I've been thinking a lot about crisis, which, is quite a heavy thing.
Mm,
And yeah, I guess thinking about crisis, hope like being a turning point. So
mm,
crisis being something that hopefully can't get any worse, and it can only get better, right? And so we're in climate crisis. We're in sort of, there's a lot going on in the world just now that seems to be at crisis point. And so hopefully as human beings, we can come together and sort of learn and question and think about these things together, but also on our own and thinking about what we can do as individuals. But hope being the kind of this being the turning point
yeah,
for things only
yeah.
to get better.
I think that's a really powerful realization because I think for so long I was afraid of the climate crisis as this thing in the future that was going to happen unless we stopped it. And I think reframing that to understand we are in the climate crisis, it is happening,
Mm,
actually to me feels so much more empowering because it's like, okay, cool, it's here. So there's no point being scared of it anymore because it's here. So now
yeah.
what do we do? And my friend Lauren Chang, who I must bring, she's been on the podcast before, but I must get her back. She has this lovely expression, put your hands in the soil, by which she means just do the thing that's in front of you where you can help. And I think, yeah, that's been a real reframe for me as well, actually, is understanding that we are in the crisis. It's not something that's off
Yeah.
in the future.
And then it's, yeah, just acknowledging the things, as you said, like the things in front of you. So the things
Mm,
that you're interested in. Because, there's lots of things that I'm like, oh, I would love to be able to sort of solve the energy problem. But actually, it's not my skill set and it's not my
mm.
expertise. But actually, if I can advocate for better use of materials, or yeah, it's figuring out what kind of the individual can do
Yeah.
within it as well.
And to your point about connection, it's trusting that someone else has got the things you can't do. I think I spent a long time again with that kind of single-handed savior syndrome that I must, not that I ever thought I was going to save the planet on my own, but that I must be doing all the things.
Yeah.
Whereas I think when you're in community with other people, you understand that that person's got that covered and that person's got that covered, and we can each have a disproportionately positive impact by focusing
Mm.
on our own skill sets.
Yeah, and it's also engaging for me. It's also engaging with well groups like making design circular, or there's sort of more localized ones here in Scotland as well, closing the loop and different sort of I guess like groups of like-minded people
Mm.
too. So it's then kind of building that sort of network or supports as
Yes,
well.
yeah, and we should give a shout out to People Planet Pint and or People Planet Pastry if you're not a drinker,
Ooh.
because they are just a very simple. It's a very simple idea that's kind of gone global, where you can go for either a pint or a pastry, and meet people who care about the planet, and they are nationwide. So and
Oh, I've not
possibly
come.
even yeah, possibly even global. So for listeners who can't access any of the Scottish ones that Steph is part of, I think People Planet Pint or People Planet Pastry would be a good shout. If you look on Eventbrite, there's almost certainly one near you. So yeah, that idea of just being in community with other people who care.
Yeah, I've never came across them. I'll need to look them up
Mm.
as well and just see who else I can meet.
Yeah, they're lovely because the idea, it's a very simple idea. You just meet at a pub or a coffee shop and just chat. There's no agenda, there's no curriculum. It's just about making those connections and building those communities. And I think in crisis, community is, perhaps the most important thing. As you said, whether that's a
Mhm.
personal crisis or a global crisis.
Yeah, and
Amazing.
learn. I think learning from each other as well, because
Mm.
everyone has different experiences to bring to the table.
Yeah, and
Mm.
different resources and different skill sets. I went to a conference once, and it was kind of set up like a wedding with big tables of 6 chairs, and each table was given a bunch of resources and a bunch of problems. And of course, your resources didn't solve your problems, so you had to go and have conversations with people on other tables to swap things and barter things. And
Mhm.
every time you made a connection or a swap, you tied a piece of wool to the back of your chair and the back of their chair. And after 20 minutes, everybody had solved all their problems, and there was this beautiful visual web throughout this huge conference room that just showed that we can do it. As humans, we are capable of collaboration and problem solving and
Mm.
sharing and all of those things.
I would like a visual of that actually to
Yeah, I
see.
wish I'd taken a photo, but it's burnt onto my brain.
Just
Um,
need the right people making all those decisions.
mm, yeah, I think that's a lovely place to leave it, Steph, on the note of collaboration and connection and community. And thank you so much for sharing your story and telling us a bit more about your work.
Oh, it's been a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
We did it. We got there.
Yay! Sorry.